Yes, I will stop sharing. And now you should be able to.
Okay. I'm going to begin with this picture. This is my photo when I was a graduate student so many, many years ago. I think it was taken in 1977. And I have a presentation today. Let me get to that. Let me see. Oh, let me just, new share here. Okay. Okay, that's, yeah. I want to talk about a topic that's really important to me, municipalities and climate change. I am by no means an expert on climate change. For that, you'll have to ask Michael Mann or Richard Alley to come speak. And all I have in common with Michael Mann is that his building is next to mine on campus. And the subtitle is Don't Wait for the Tornado, and that's because I'm going to tell you a story about it. I grew up in Kansas, and what most people know about Kansas is that there are tornadoes there. And a few years ago, 2007, what's called an EF5 tornado hit the little town called Greensburg. It was about 1.7 miles in width. It traveled 22 miles an hour. Its winds were 205 miles per hour and destroyed 95% of the town. In the 2000 census, there were 1,500 plus residents, but in the 2010 census, there were about half of that. And with the help of the nonprofit Greensburg Greentown, they made the following changes. They decided that all of their future buildings, all of their buildings would be LEED platinum. They had to rebuild the whole town. And the city's power would be entirely supplied by 10 wind turbines. And this is a great example of a local initiative. It was in what we call in America, a deep red part of a red state. And I didn't want to wait for a tornado to rebuild State College. And I want to now tell you, this is something you can get from the Union of Concerned Scientists. And some of you probably, who are science graduate students, probably know this a lot better than I do. During the lifetime of today's kindergartner, this is what will happen to in his lifetime or her lifetime or their lifetime. You should expect dramatic increases in the number of summer days of 90 plus degrees. The air quality could deteriorate because of the heat. Yields of Concord grapes, sweet corn, and some apple varieties may decrease. You may see certain hardwood tree species disappear or at least decline or vanish. And you may see loss of habitat for a lot of migratory and resident bird species. Now, higher emissions versus lower emissions. State College averages about 10 90 plus degree days plus per year. When I first came here in the early 80s, I did not have an air-conditioned office, and I did not care except for maybe a week or two of every year. But in the future, I might care. In a high emissions future, it could be more like 40 days by mid-century, or 65 at the end of the century, and 24 or more days above 100 degrees. If we have a low emissions future, that could be halved. Now, political action here is what I'm really interested in. And right now, you know, we look at the state and the federal level. The federal government right now is pretty much useless in climate change. They've left the Paris Accords. We're on our own. I hope that the incoming Biden administration will make some dramatic changes here. Our Commonwealth government has done a lot. They've mandated 80% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2050 under an executive order. That's a bit short of the Paris goal of 100% reduction. Pennsylvania produces a rather disproportionate amount of greenhouse gases. We produce 1% of the world's greenhouse gases, and we have a lot less than 1% of the population of the world. And Pennsylvania is an energy producing state. It is a high polluting state. However, the other step that Pennsylvania is in the process of taking is joining what's called a RGGI, or Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, with a lot of other states in the region. We're the only one that hasn't. And that will force us to make greenhouse gas reductions, because we are way behind our neighbor states in that regards. The markets, some good news: solar and wind power are now cheaper than coal and natural gas in many cases. But again, climate change doesn't care about your markets that much. The local level, this is a program by the Sierra Club. Other advocacy groups have also entered in here. They have something called a Ready for 100 program, which I learned about by going to state Sierra Club meetings. I'm one of the few politicians that sought them out. They had to literally track Mayor Perdue of Pittsburgh all the way down for this. Their goal is net zero greenhouse gases by 2050 or earlier, and a 100% renewable energy pledge by municipal government. This can be made at the municipal or state level. 170 plus municipalities have joined, the largest being Chicago and Los Angeles. Both of Pennsylvania's two major cities have joined, and 4 states have joined. We joined on June 3rd, 2019, and we were the 127th government entity to do so. Ferguson Township hasn't officially joined, but they made a very similar pledge in 2017. And together, these two pledges resulted in 2 big initiatives by local governments. One is that a bunch of local government, I'll tell you about later, but the first is the formation of what's called a Climate Action Committee at the Regional Council of Governments level. The Council of Governments is is sort of a confederation, you could say, of all the local governments in this area: State College Borough, Ferguson Township, College Township, Patton Township, Harris and Half Moon Township are taking this initiative together. But another initiative that they're getting, I'll get to. Here's some local action possibilities. One of the things is to implement LEED standards for more buildings in downtown, at least LEED Gold, and have incentives to do those. Some of the new buildings have come up to LEED standards, some have not. The school district in all of its new buildings had at least LEED Gold, and some of their grade schools are LEED Platinum.
You have 2 minutes.
I have 2 minutes. Okay, I can finish this in 2 minutes. This part is what's really important. We have a tentative power purchase agreement between a lot of local municipalities, the school district, the water authority, and the bus and the CATA bus system. This has been stalled by COVID-19, but we met just today. And this will end up having all these municipalities having 100% solar energy in a few years. One of the other things that I'd like to push over the years is to get CATA to convert to electric buses. Now, they're in very early stages about that, but we have begun talking to them at least. Call for action. I want to show you these 3 statements. The first statement is by Franklin Roosevelt to a labor leader. I agree with you. I want to do it, but you have to make me do it. You have to keep your elected officials' attention when you want action on something. The second is by Greta Thunberg. I don't want you to listen to me. I want you to listen to the scientists and unite behind the science, and then take real action. And the third is by a real scientist, Mara Prentice, physics professor at Harvard. In sum, science and technology are not preventing us from achieving a 100% US renewable energy economy. The barriers are all political, social, and economic. Conclusion here. The borough, the COG has 6 municipalities, which I just listed off for you. The borough and some other municipalities have sustainability officers and committees. Elected officials can act, but they'll turn to other priorities. Our attention spans aren't very long and people are constantly making demands on them. You want to keep after them to take real action. So you have to make us do it, and you can't wait for a tornado to motivate you to do it. That's my talk. Any questions about this or about local government?
Thank you so much. Diego?
It was already approved, and I was for it. And there was some hesitation, and we're probably going to have to sort of make a rule so that there's a concern that other groups might request it, like the neighborhood groups, that what this is about interfacing with student government groups. And that's something we're very interested in doing. I don't know if that answers your question.
Nico?
So you, on your slide of solutions and also sort of contribution to the problem, there's one key element that I think is missing, which is that the largest individually determined choice, I guess you'd say, in terms of our climate impact is our diet, at least in the US. I grew up in California, so I did the math there. A family of 4 that has hamburgers for dinner instead of lentils could drive to Vegas from LA if they had a reasonably efficient car and have the same net impact. And the way that we think about these two things is very different. No one would say, oh, it's reasonable to drive to Vegas for dinner. That's an environmentally responsible thing to do. But the reaction to, in particular, beef and pork consumption is not proportional to the impact. And the school lunch program is sort of where I would see the quickest decision with the most leverage in terms of affecting consumption. But I think it would have to be paired with an educational initiative, because I certainly didn't become vegetarian on the basis of knowing that it involved an animal dying. Had to.
I agree with you about the impact of diet on climate change. That's been well documented. The reason I didn't include it is that there's not a lot of local government levers there, but like there aren't any that I know of. There might be some with school districts, which we have no control over. There's probably a lot that can be done with school lunches aside from that. If you saw Michael Moore's movie Where to Invade Next, the contrast between the way school lunches are done here and in other countries is enormous. But yes, I agree. That is actually an area that we could have an impact. And I know some people who are experts on that, but I'm not.
Well,
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Jesse. Informative and more a comment than a question, I guess. I wanted to stress especially how important I think it is that we urge CATA to move from natural gas powered vehicles as soon as possible. I think the insidious nature and the dangers of natural gas cannot be overstated. So please make that your priority. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more.
any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Well, it was my pleasure. And um, you all are probably a lot more active than I was. When I was a graduate student, all I thought about was getting out of graduate school. And so, and which means I didn't appreciate it enough, probably, from my perspective today. But I wish all of you luck with your programs, and feel free to contact me whenever you have an issue having to do with local government. And take care. And we look forward to interacting with whomever you choose for this position of representative.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I'll now let you have your meeting.
Okay, have a nice night.
You too.
I'll turn it over to Claire now, who is the Student Fee Board Chair for our second special presentation tonight. Claire, would you like to share your screen?
I would, yeah.
You should be able to now.
Right. What can you see now? Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
You can, okay. Okay, so
in presenter mode.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'm the chair of the fee board this year. Basically, I just want to talk a little bit about what the student fee is, the history and the background, a little bit about the membership, a little bit about our mission, vision, and value statements, and also what the fee board process is. So a little bit about the history. It started out as the student activity fee in 1996. And more recently, there started to be a discussion about how do we get students involved in determining how student fees are spent. And this really started to happen in 2017 and 2018 with the student initiated fee and the creation of the student fee board, which is made up of all students. And just as a note, the technology fee is made a part of tuition. So now the only fee other than what you would pay for tuition is the student initiated fee that we're talking about here. So the student fee is about roughly $250. For most graduate students, it's paid on your behalf by your assistantship, but many graduate and professional students do pay the fee out of pocket. And we really tend to focus on this per student rate, but when offices come to the fee board, what they propose is a dollar amount. Like, for example, most offices will request something like $200,000 for annual expenses. And we look at all of these different expenses and we calculate a per student rate after all of the different offices come in. We have all of our hearings and decisions, and then we decide the per student rate after that is all done. Just so you can see a little bit about what the breakdown is, this is 2019-2020, and this is the current academic year, 2020-21. A large chunk of it is for facilities projects, followed by a large chunk for campus recreation. And then another large chunk is activities. A lot of that goes to UPAC, the University Park Allocations Committee. And then there's a smaller amount of services, and these are things like student legal services and CAPS. And then a very, very small amount is for student government. So all of the funds that GPSA spends, with a very small exception, is from the student fee, which is why there are some restrictions on what we can and can't spend funds on because of the student fee board. So yeah, what's currently funded? These 4 categories are funded: activities, facilities, services, and recreation. And these are some of the things that are funded. We fund the student farm, student governments, CAPS. And we're just starting to develop and release this funded by your student fee stamp. So you can hopefully see very soon with more clarity and transparency what the student initiated fee is actually funding. So in terms of membership, the University Park Student Fee Board consists of 12 voting members. Mainly, these are mostly student government affiliated. Both the UPUA and the GPSA president serve on it. So Alex is serving on the fee board on your behalf, and both the UPUA and GPSA president also appoint members. So UPUA has 3 appointees and GPSA has 2 appointees. There are also 5 at-large members, which are hopefully, usually there's preference given to folks that are not affiliated with student government, and they are not appointed by the GPSA and UPA presidents, but it's through an application process. There are also some non-voting members. Specifically, there's an at-large alternate, the UPAC chair, and the director of communications all serve as non-voting members of the fee board. So a little bit about our mission. I just want to highlight a few things. The purpose of the fee board is to support out-of-class experiences in those 4 categories, and we really aim to be participatory, transparent, and equitable in recommending how the fee is distributed. It's really all about out-of-class experiences. I think that's by far the most important part. For our values, we just solidified our values this year, and we are focusing on the following values: accessibility, accountability, equity, fairness, justice, sustainability, and transparency. And these are not only values that the fee board emphasizes, but also in the offices that and organizations that we fund. So for the process, in April and May, we select members in the chair right after student government elections. And then in the early fall and sometimes throughout the summer, there's training and internal development. And then in November through February, we have formal hearings where all of the offices and organizations that we fund come and give about a 20-minute presentation to the fee board and answer about 20 minutes of questions. And then in around February or March, we'll make a decision based on our deliberations. And I'll note that our final product is a formal recommendation to the Vice President for Student Affairs and President Barron, but it's not a binding recommendation. It's just a recommendation. We don't make the final decision. We do have public comment in every meeting, just like GPSA, and all of our meetings are public. So I would encourage you to stop by and see what we're about. And you can always email us for the Zoom information. And just one thing I'll note briefly is that so most graduate students don't even know that they pay the fee because it's just sort of automatically taken off with their assistantship. But this is not something that most universities do. Most universities have graduate students paying the fee themselves out of pocket. So I think this is something that student government should really keep our eye on to see if it transitions, because I think there are some rumblings about that transitioning in the future to putting student fees out of pocket instead of being paid with the assistantship. So just something to think about, and I think something that GPSA should definitely pay attention to. But yeah, you can email the student fee PSU email if you have any questions, but I'll also be happy to answer your questions here.
Are there any questions for Claire? Diego?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's something that we're discussing actively as a fee board. There is some talk of refunds, and we're asking Damon Sims and others if that's even a possibility to even consider. And we'll hopefully get that conversation going a little bit further before we return to it as a fee board. But mostly, with one exception, every single office and organization that we fund has been able to transition their services and programs online. So I really think that the offices that we fund have done such an incredible job and transitioning. So if there was some sort of refund, I think it would be potentially quite small. But yeah, that's sort of the status of that conversation.
Questions for Claire?